Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almasyan. Every time I post a video about Julian Assange, YouTube suppresses the video. Minus 60 to 70% of views. I'm sure that it's not about you. You're interested in the case of Julian Assange, and that's why you also follow Syriana Analysis. But the algorithm of YouTube suppresses certain content. Yesterday, YouTube deleted 5 of my videos. So if you want to support the message, please publish this video and post it on your social media accounts, because yesterday it was the 4th anniversary since Julian Assange has been brutally detained from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and he has been sent to the Belmarsh prison. So we're going to discuss this case, and I'm very pleased to host Juan Passarelli. He is an award-winning journalist and filmmaker, and one of his recent movies or films was about the title is The War on Journalism, the case of Julian Assange. The link, guys, is in the description below. Please go and watch it. Juan, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. It's a pleasure to have you on my channel.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's actually quite important, very important for me to raise the issue of Julian Assange regularly, and we don't have to wait for the 5th anniversary or the 6th anniversary to speak about it again. We have to speak about it, in my opinion, on a daily basis. I come to surprise that when I speak with some friends and colleagues, even here in Berlin, still there are people who do not know the story of Julian Assange, and that's why let's discuss about this case. Maybe we open some eyes. If we open 1 or 2 eyes here or there, that would be an achievement, in my opinion. So the 11th of April, yesterday, marked the 4th anniversary since Julian Assange was detained by the British police and sent to the Belmarsh prison. He is now threatened with extradition to the US, where he will face up to 175 years in jail. Can you please detail the charges of the US against him, and under what legal grounds he has been detained for over 4 years in the Belmarsh?
Well, he's actually, according to the European Court of Human Rights, by which the UK still adheres to, it still governs the UK, a prisoner on remand, that is, that they don't have charges in the UK, can only be detained in prison for 2 years. He's been in prison now for 4. So, but if there's something about the Julian Assange case that is almost a given, is that there is an Assange exception to every norm. So in every single one of his legal cases, I've been following it for 13 years now, very closely. There is irregularities, massive irregularities on every single case, and corruption by every single one of the states that has contributed towards persecution. So there's corruption in the UK case, there's corruption in the Swedish case, there was huge corruption in the Ecuadorian government, and how they expelled one of their own citizens from their embassy. And of course, the United States coordinating it and asking for favors in the background. Julian is charged for revealing the truth. He is being charged under the Espionage Act. That is, they want to make a journalist, somebody that acted with the New York Times, the Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, actually Washington Post as well in other publications, not the ones he's charged in. And he did exactly the same as these journalists, but the United States government is trying to separate him and declare him a spy, not a journalist. This is the first time the US has brought such charges on a journalist. I mean, the whistleblowers, they have faced this type of persecution since the Daniel Ellsberg case, when he revealed the Pentagon Papers in the Nixon era. Now, journalists the U.S. had thought about pressing charges on the New York Times at that point in time, and many others, but they had never done it because it goes against their constitution, in the First Amendment of the Constitution, which says the government will not make any laws that prevent speech. This espionage law and how they're using it goes exactly against this First Amendment. In Europe, it's also of an unprecedented nature, because the fact that he is in prison in the UK for political charges makes him a political prisoner, of course, and also it puts everyone that handles secret documents for national security journalism or any other sort of journalism that requires you to have government secret documents and publish them because of wrongdoing. It puts you at risk of if they do it to Julian, then there's a precedent so that they can do it to anybody else.
Yes.
So in the United Kingdom, just so you know, as we stand now, any journalist that has U.S. secret documents could be extradited after the president was set in the first court of the Julian case.
So one of the cases that whenever I post about Julian Assange, I receive some, of course, criticism from people who dislike Julian Assange. And nowadays, unfortunately, most of them are coming from what they call themselves the NAFO. And there are two arguments they are raising, one of which is he was a hacker. And the second is he sexually abused women in Sweden. What are the, let's say, the facts about the hacking charges against him and the sexual abuse in Sweden?
Sure. So Julian, when he was a teenager, when he was 16, he was a hacker. So there's a certain truth to that. But during his WikiLeaks years, he's been a publisher. He's not been a hacker. He's not hacked into any systems. There is one computer abuse act charge in the indictment, and it refers to a password hash that was given by Chelsea, allegedly by Chelsea Manning, to Julian Assange. And Chelsea asked, can you help to crack this hash so that and the idea was that if Chelsea Manning was able to access the computer systems through that other way with the computer with the other password, she would be able to protect herself and hide her identity more.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this charge is so bloody weak that they started with that charge, and a week later they added the espionage charges. It was, Julian Assange has not committed any hacking since at least since the period that he's been in WikiLeaks, and certainly not during these publications. In terms of the Swedish case, it is a huge injustice, especially for the two women who are involved in this case, because for 7 years they didn't accuse Julian of rape. Let's be very clear. Julian was never charged, and he was never accused by these women of rape. The women approached the police station to ask if they could try to force Julian into doing a STD test. And when they came out of the police station, the police had decided it was going to be a rape case, and they published this information the next day. They leaked the information and ruined Julian's reputation. During these 7 years, the Swedish prosecution decided to keep the case on a preliminary investigation basis. So in order to bring charges, they would have to finish this preliminary phase. And the only thing they had to do was interview Julian Assange, for which he made himself available in the UK. It's a common process, and they did it to hundreds of people during the time Julian was detained in the UK, where the prosecutors come to the country, interview him, and then decide if they're going to bring charges or not. They took from 2010 up to 2016 to come and visit him inside the Ecuadorian embassy, after the UN declared that he was being arbitrarily detained, and that the Swedish and the UK should pay reparations and release him immediately. That's when the Swedish prosecutors came, and in 2017, early 2017, they dropped the case. And some people even say, well, yeah, but one of the charges was the period of where it could be prosecuted ran out. And you think, yes, exactly. The period where the time basis for which this alleged charge that never happened, that was never brought, ran out without the prosecutor doing the due diligence. This is a rape investigation where the women did not accuse the alleged perpetrator, and for which they were captured. And once there is an allegation of this in the Swedish system, it is taken out of the women's hands, and the state deals with it. So the women received hatred and accosted in the internet for years by supporters of Julian, that internet people can be mean, and well, they suffered deeply for 7 years because of a malpractice. There's another thing that is important, is that the United Kingdom was revealed through a Freedom of Information request to be for enticing the Swedish prosecutors not to come, to the point that there's this very famous email now where the prosecutor in the UK says, Marianne, prosecutor in Sweden, don't get cold feet. It said UK story or something like that. There's a story above and a link to a story. He says, don't get cold feet, referring, please don't come and interview Julian in 2012. In 2011, he made himself available. In 2012, after his asylum, the Ecuadorian government made Julian Assange available and its embassy, so that they could come and interview him, and they didn't for 7 years. Sorry, I could. Yeah.
It's crazy when you listen to all the cities and what he went through in the past decade, and also the injustice. And I'm someone who comes from Syria, and I've been told all the times that the justice system in Europe is way better than what it exists in Syria. I know there is lots of corruption in Syria, especially in the judiciary system, but there is also corruption here, and it's on a higher level. And I can one day I will also speak about my experience with the judiciary system here in Germany. There are so many, I would say, inconsistencies and they can follow journalists and they can call them anything. Like, I'm myself a journalist, but the court can simply say you're not a journalist. We don't consider you a journalist. You're a propagandist, or you are this or that. So they deprive you from the status that you're a journalist. Therefore, they can prosecute you with different laws, because simply the judge doesn't consider you a journalist. And now what's happening with, of course, Julian Assange is a completely different case. But there are so many means for them to come after journalists nowadays by simply just depriving them from their professional status, for example.
It's scary that you were talking about a judge saying you're not a journalist, but what's happening now in Europe is that they are trying to give the power to the executive, so that the executive can decide who is who is a propagandist and who is a journalist? I mean, since when does freedom of speech have barriers if you decide to support the government or not? This is absolutely insane. And
Actually, the executive has lots of power over the judicial system, for example, here in Berlin. And most of the information they get about me or any other journalist is from these people in the executives.
Wow.
And they send them reports that, Kevork is not a journalist. And the reason for that is because he does propaganda work for the Syrian government. He does propaganda work for this and that. And if that doesn't work, if this works, they can literally destroy your career. They can send you to jail. They can end your career. They can end you.
They can close your
They have the
bank
power to do
account.
that.
I mean, they've literally done that to a German woman who was in Donbass. They closed her bank accounts and her parents' bank accounts for speaking
Yes.
on the internet.
Yes.
Yeah, scary.
It's scary times, and imagine if we move to centralized digital currencies. That would be the end of free speech if they force on the people this idea. But now that Julian Assange is in prison, in your opinion, of all the prisons in the UK, why have they sent him to the Belmarsh, which is known for hosting dangerous criminals and even terrorists? And how is he holding up in the prison?
Well, it's interesting that they chose Belmarsh Prison, which is also known as British Guantanamo. It houses the most dangerous criminals, and for some reason they thought it was appropriate for an intellectual who's never heard anybody. He's the as far as I understand, the most veteran person in his wing. That's because Belmarsh is a prison where people go to whilst they are being tried or their case is being solved. And apparently that makes him one of the oldest inhabitants of the prison already. And Julian's case doesn't seem to be going anywhere in the near future. I mean, the British have a weird system where you don't have the right to appeal straight away. You have to ask the higher court if they will grant you the right to
appeal,
to hear the appeal. It's absolutely, it was very ridiculous in my mind, but the British.
It's the same in Berlin, by the way.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Out of experience, I'm telling you.
Okay, so the High Court right now in the appeal that Julian made has taken 6 months, more than 6 months to decide if they're going to give Julian the right to appeal or not. And in that period, the news dies down. So Julian's not, there's nobody talking about Julian, not in the mainstream. Channels like this, there are a few who are now kind of the channels that talk about the truth rather than Rachel Maddow or Charles Tucker Carlson.
But how do you explain that the mainstream corporate journalists are silent about this case and sometimes even slandering Julian Assange? Aren't they afraid that they one day might be the next? Because look, how I think about these things a little bit different. Now the power is in the hands of this establishment, but the power may diminish one day and a different establishment could come in power, and these journalists could be the next because they're the ones who would be in a position of opposition to the new establishment, right? So they could be one day in jail if there is a precedent. How could you explain this?
I think that journalists have, especially in the West, have this idea that they're protected by this institution and by this, the almost religious title that you are inscribed in as a journalist of the mainstream, that they will not go after you. People like journalists like Craig Murray, for example, get prison time on a charge of contempt of court, while a BBC journalist will get the BBC to pay a fine. You know what I mean? So I really think that they live in this. Many of these journalists, by the way, especially the leaders of these big newspapers, they have come out against these charges, and they have both in the UK and in the US, they have urged the governments to stop this persecution, and that this could have serious freedom of speech implications. Now, when you talk to these journalists and say, look, are you scared that in the next big leak, if you're in the next big leak, are you scared that you might be, prosecuted for this? There is this cognitive dissonance that I find when I talk to these people, that they feel protected by their institution, but there is nothing really stopping the government from taking that step. And, in democracy, there tends to be a left and a right-leaning situation, and there's nothing stopping somebody from becoming an authoritarian person that could potentially, become an adversary of these newspapers as you just described. And that's when these systems that are created to guarantee our liberties, if they are corrupted, they will open a channel for others to be. And it's only a question of time. It's not a matter of yes or no, more journalists will be prosecuted. It's a question of time and waiting for the big leak. There was a leak last week. It wasn't made with journalists. There will be others.
I just want to mention a few things here. The people who are coming after Julian Assange are in a position of power. And these journalists who embedded themselves with the establishment, the elites require them complete submission. And in any case, if they disagree with this elite even slightly, they may also they may also be pushed under the bus. These journalists must understand that they are not protected by the establishment. They are probably now they feel they are protected because they are on the same line of the mainstream narrative. But in Arabic we say the wheels turn. The circumstances change. You may change your ideas, you may change your opinions about certain things, and one day you want to do your actual job, which is journalism, and then you will be the one who empowered these elites into extent that you will be the next victim of these elites. This is what these journalists do not understand nowadays, and I speak this with an heavy like pain in my chest, because nowadays people really think a journalist is someone who's reading the script when they read the teleprompter, for example. This is not what journalists do. Journalists dig in and they search for holes in every argument, in every event. This is what journalists do. And nowadays, these people who try to dig in, they're called you have a negative attitude, you're raising conspiracy theories. No, this is what journalists do. But in the past at least 1 decade, you're now used to parrots reading teleprompters and reading scripts and thinking this is what journalism is about, which is not. So we have to always redefine what journalism is so that we put everything in its proper context and also protect other journalists. Now, Assange published thousands of classified documents that revealed the war crimes of the US and its allies in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and a long list of nations, right? But now we have a war in Ukraine. In your opinion, what difference Julian would have made if he was out of jail in regard to the current war?
Well, every single war, these are not my words, these are Julian words. Every war is started by lies. And peace can also be brought by truth. In 2011, one cable that WikiLeaks revealed ended the Iraq War. It's quite unbelievable to think about it. One piece of paper that described a massacre that happened in a farmer's house where 4 or 5 adults and 5 children
with a child, yes,
were massacred. They were handcuffed, and they put a bullet to the head of each one of them. These were American troops and multinational troops, a coalition of allies, but certainly led by America. And after they murdered them, they ordered a plane to drop a bomb in the house so that it would eliminate the evidence. The evidence wasn't eliminated completely, and the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings wrote a cable to the ambassador of the UN in Geneva, the U.S. ambassador of the UN in Geneva, and that's the paper that leaked. At the time that it leaked, it was nearing when the Iraqi government had to renew the immunity that U.S. troops had in order to be able to fight the war in Iraq. The government was so outraged by this cable that they decided not to renew the immunity, and that forced Obama to withdraw 50,000 troops. That was the end of the big military occupation in Iraq.
Wow.
And if that happened in Iraq, WikiLeaks also helped put a stop to the Afghan. I don't know if, there was some documents that removed a whole bunch of troops from Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure that if WikiLeaks was around during the Vietnam War and could have had documents about the Tonkin incident, it would have revealed that it was a huge lie. The same way, it could have revealed how this war in Ukraine is a NATO-led, US-led war to continue their eternal war apparatus, which has also been a subject that WikiLeaks has touched many times. The eternal war of the United States and its defense apparatus, private defense apparatus.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, because there is a precedent of now politically persecuting a journalist, we know that there is one German journalist, her bank account is being blocked, and she's wanted now in Germany. If she comes back, she has to stand in front of a court or go directly to jail. And I know there is another peace activist that he owns a bar here, the Peace Bar, I think it's called, No War Bar. He was also charged in the past weeks. So it's becoming very scary. So I feel like when I speak about the Ukraine case, I'm jumping over ticking bombs. That what language I should use, what terminologies I should use. So it's completely, in my opinion, suppression of freedom of expression, and we're slipping into, like, gradually but surely into fascism. And I'm very, to be honest, I'm very concerned about how things will be unfold here in Germany. And if I want to end up this,
I'm confident that fascism is already there. I mean, if it wasn't, we wouldn't have a political prisoner in the West. The most prominent journalist of our lifetime is in prison because of crimes he published of the imperial power. This is, this is fascism. This is the way they silence people. In the 70s, in the 60s, they shot the prophets, the truth tellers, the fighters, the dissidents. They shot them dead in the middle of the streets or in a speech. Now we see them tortured inside prison.
What else can we do beyond raising awareness about Julian on social media platforms to help his release from prison, like protests, crowdfundings? What can we do besides talking about the
Look,
case?
I always find that this question is a very personal question, because everybody's different, everybody's abilities and capabilities are different. I think that we should always think about why WikiLeaks was created. WikiLeaks was created to help humanity educate themselves about what's going on. And in that sense, it's our duty to educate ourselves about what is going on around us, so that we can take the best approach to make matters, make our situation better. So I always say, dig in, study as much as you can, and from that you will find new ways where you can collaborate. If you're a designer, you'll design something. If you're in a corrupt organization, you will go to wikileaks.org and submit something. If you have computer abilities, you'll do that. If you like going to protests and doing that stuff, maybe you'll print a poster and you'll go in front of the U.S. Embassy every Tuesday. In Brandenburger Tor, where the U.S. Embassy is, and go protest with the people that go every Tuesday. You know, it's donations. WikiLeaks survives on donations. It has all throughout its life, which is a wonderful thing that gave them complete independence. The average donation was €30, and that's how they survive up to now. Julian's defense is financed by the public, so obviously, as much a small donation from people is always a good thing. But in general, what people should do, people should educate themselves and act accordingly from what they've learned.
Yeah. Actually, I will, guys, put the link.
Which is what most journalists end up not doing right now.
Yeah,
they end up spewing shit without actually researching it. Sorry.
Yes. That's very true.
That was a cheap
Especially,
shot.
I have learned this big time during the Syrian war. There are so many experts on Syria nowadays. Believe me, they don't they don't know what are they talking about. They don't even know the social structure in Syria. They don't know the political system, but they have prestigious jobs. So there is this power in the media that they can portray some people as experts and others as conspiracy theorists. So we have to fight against that by education, as you mentioned. We have to research, we have to dig in, and we have to learn our role. What can we do during these times? Guys, I will put a link for donations to the legal team of Julian Assange in the description below. I will put also the links of Juan, his Twitter and his film also in the description below. Go and please hit him a follow and also support his work. Juan, thank you very much for being my guest. It was a really pleasure to have you, and hopefully we can meet also soon on a cup of coffee.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much, guys. It's a great pleasure, and thank you guys for watching this show on Syriana Analysis. As I mentioned, please spread the word. Also share this video with your friends. And if you want to support my independent work, all the means are in the description below. And see you next time.